Good morning, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time to our first Job Train How Talent session of 2021. It seems like an age ago that we started these back in April last year. I think this is our 24th or our 25th. Delighted to see so many people sign up for this session this morning, and very grateful to Paul Ainley from Chatter, who's going to be joining us for this session. I know the weather's a bit rubbish outside. Storm Christoph is upon us. But the good news is that a certain Donald J. Trump has now left the building at last. The vaccine's rolling out, and that means we might even get to meet a little bit later this year. So it's all good. Things are getting better. So just a little bit of housekeeping for me this morning. First things first, can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? Just pop something in the chat stream. That would help me out. And I know that I'm not just speaking to myself this morning. Oh, wait. And also we are live on Crowdcast. We're live on LinkedIn. We're live on Twitter and YouTube as well. Great. Brilliant. Right. So first things first, we would love questions from you this morning. Today's session is going to be, I guess, somewhere between half an hour, 45 minutes. And yeah, please ask anything you like. There is a bit down here in the ask questions bit. And we also have a poll. Please do click on there at the bottom, vote on it. We just really want to know, do you currently have resources, tools, and inductions in place for your hiring managers? Just a little bit of insight that will help us. And yeah, thank you very much. So let's get on with the show. I'm going to invite Paul with me this morning. Paul is a founder of Chatter Communications. We've been working with them for years. He's got tons of knowledge, tons of experience to share. So super grateful for him for joining us this morning. I'm going to try and dig him out. There he is. Great. And Paul, I'm going to invite you on screen now. I want to do that. I'm waiting for Paul to join us, so grab a quick brew. I apologize in advance if you see my cat join us. The weather's that bad, I felt a bit tight about kicking him out, so you may see him in the background. You may also see his muddy paw prints behind me. Sorry about that. Paul, good morning.
Morning, Giles. You okay?
Yeah, very well indeed. How are you?
I'm okay. I've taken my own pet precautions. My dogs have been locked away in a room where hopefully, even if all the DPD parcels arrive at once, we still should be able to continue. You should still be able to hear me. So yeah, they always pick the moment that you're on a presentation or a meeting to turn up and deliver the various things that you don't need that you've ordered during lockdown.
Don't adjust. I've got school materials arriving from Amazon for my daughter this morning. I've got her with the cat locked away upstairs until 12 o'clock. So we should be safe till then. But, you know, best laid plans and all that. We are back at home now, which is a shame. I got so used to being in the office, decent broadband, all the rest of it. But here we are, and here we shall stay just to keep everybody safe. So, Paul, for the benefit of everybody, please give us an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Chatter too.
Yes, I'm one of three founders at Chatter, and we're coming up to our 10th birthday. So we've been going for 10 years as of the 1st of April. And I think this year, more than ever, it will feel like an April Fool to sort of reach that milestone.
God, that's my birthday. I am an April Fool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for real.
Well, we the three of us, myself, Lisa and John, we'd worked together at an agency called Barker's, which unfortunately is kind of long since gone, but national agency specialising in, at that time, recruitment advertising. And in the couple of years leading up to us deciding to set up Chatter, we'd been doing a lot of work with clients like O2, Nestle, United Utilities on a broadening brief. So we were starting to look at things like health and wellbeing, pay and benefits, and more of that HR mix as part of the experience of the employer brand. So not just how do you flag wave and put a great campaign together, which we were, dab hands at, but once you'd got hold of people, how did you start delivering on that promise? And that felt really exciting to us and has really been the kind of foundation of what we've done ever since, which is to help organizations to be the best that they possibly can be in terms of the way that they communicate and engage with their own people, which in turns creates that amazing buzz about what a great place it is to work.
Self-perpetuating in that sense. I like the way you describe it as a promise. I've heard that before. So sometimes even for us within HR, TA and recruitment, when we talk about employer branding and EVP, it sort of lends itself to a little bit of head scratching. But the promise is quite a nice way of distilling it down, isn't it? Do you want to expand on that before we get stuck into the main bit of it?
I know, you know, we've had a conversation in the past just about the language that we use. And I think that employer brand as a concept is still reasonably new. You know, it's something that's only been around for the last sort of 20 years or so in terms of something that is important to most organizations. And we can sometimes trip ourselves up over the technical language that we use. And sometimes we swap terms and phrases around. Are we talking about EVP, employer brand, talent brand, experience, all of these different things? And I think this is a really interesting session because it's a slightly different take on the whole employer brand story, which is, you know, we know that hiring managers have a massive part to play in delivering a really standout experience for candidates. And ultimately, I think what we need to start doing is to simplify the way that we talk about employer brands and simplify what we're trying to get to. So what are the objectives? Why are we doing it? And, and show hiring managers the piece of the pie that they need to be interested in. They don't really need to see, you know, it's like you guys from a software perspective, nobody needs to see the code that makes things work behind the scenes. They just need to experience it and know that it's going to work in a really kind of robust, trustworthy way. And it's exactly the same with the employer brand. And I think, increasingly, particularly through lockdown, these are conversations that are coming to the fore because everything has changed. So, you know, if we think about even just the way that we're going about recruiting, we're doing it virtually. And that's fine for those of us that are used to and have adapted to every day being on calls, on Zoom, on Hangout, whatever it is that you use. But there are a lot of people turning up for interviews that don't use that every day. So how do we make that experience as good for them as we possibly can make it? And I think, you know, the language is really useful. I think if we're saying to hiring managers, how can we just make sure that we are kind, considerate, you know, that we put people at their ease, that we make people comfortable, that we're clear about what we want from the role, that we're clear about who the person is that we're looking to hire, that we give them some feedback, that we give them some time. So, you know, from it's understanding what part has the hiring manager got to play in the wider sort of employer brand and experience piece, and how do you help enable them? But yeah, I think language is key, making it simple, making it accessible, and making it really relevant for them.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of interesting points there. Really, for now, at least, and perhaps even going forward, gone are the days where we had or were able to show office environments and you know what we're like when we show up to work, because now we're all invited to one another's homes, so it's quite different in some ways. You know, Job Train's employer brand is stuck behind me in the form of pictures on the wall or my face and things like that. So it's quite interesting in terms of how do we now understand, encapsulate and convey the employer brand when we are not backed up with the corporate piece that we had before, which I think is actually a very good thing. It shows a bit more humanity and personality to a business and its individuals. Yeah, and I think a lot of us are being judged in terms of employers on how do we respond during COVID? How do we support our people? How are we doing that now in terms of people's well-being at home? Do they have everything they need? Do they have the support they need? Can they speak to people? And you talked about onboarding as well, and we're no different. You know, we brought 3 hires on, and one of those was very remote. Good morning, Alistair, who's joined us this morning. Alistair's based down in Cornwall, so that was completely remote in terms of interviews, no face-to-face interviews. Onboarding was done remotely. The whole induction process, and that is a challenge. You know, we're no different. We've got tech to support it, but at the same time, you know, we have to evolve.
It is, but it's also an absolutely amazing opportunity to take to hiring managers. We're working with a large retailer based in Leeds at the moment. And as for them, it's the same for every other retailer, you know, thinking about tech talent and how do you recruit tech talent in the volumes and the specialisms that you need is challenging when previously everybody's needed to be based in Leeds or to be able to travel into Leeds. So again, that language is really is a real opportunity and a really sort of a big advantage that you can now take to hiring managers to say, look, we don't need to think about things things in the old way. Let's think about who is going to be the best type of person. Where are they at the moment? What experience do they have? What would it take for us to change things up and for us to look more broadly geographically than we have previously? And people can be anywhere. I mean, there's really big advantages in terms of looking at places that are in different time zones. We've looked previously at having some of our creative freelancers, over in Asia Pac, because it gives us that 24 hours and that flexibility. So I think that's important. The other thing that I would say is that it is more challenging then to create that experience, because if you can't wow them with the office, and I wrote a blog post for HR Director magazine a few weeks ago, and it was titled something like "The Beer Fridge is Dead." We've all gone on how amazing our offices are, and we've got these games facilities and beer fridges and all the rest of it, and wow, who cares anymore? So we do have to think about the things that are now important around that process, and it is going to be about the rapport that you can build with people. It's how much effort goes into preparing them and briefing them for what's about to happen. And it is about, how hiring managers perform. And the reason that's so important is because the experience is the bit that everybody talks about. So the input around employer brand is often, that insight piece to develop the brand and the proposition, and to think about how that rolls out across career sites and advertising and all the rest of it. But the experience is what we get as consumers, and that is the thing that we talk about, whether it's good or bad. And actually, people tend to speak more freely about poor experiences than they do about good experiences.
It's human nature to more readily complain about an experience than to praise a good experience that you have. And I think that's something we all need to recognise. There's quite a lot of debate, Paul, and we're going to get into the main body of the conversation in a minute. There's quite a lot of debate, Paul, about employer brand or candidate experience, and whether that should be absolutely aligned to the equivalent of a consumer experience, or whether there's nuances between the two. Just before we get stuck in, just to see what your thoughts on that are.
I think they already are, because ultimately one thing affects the other. And at the beginning of lockdown last year, the first time around, and God, it feels so much better this time around. I mean, that was shocking, scary times in March last year. But one of the things that we did was we set up across peer-to-peer sites, for, employer rating sites. We've set up some social media monitoring. We've been doing some news monitoring and spidering. And what we've been trying to understand is there a link between the way that organizations have been perceived to treat their people and sentiment for their brand, their NPS score for their brand? Can we see that there's a cause and effect? We believe there will be, and we're just at the stage now of crunching all of that data. We've set up a group in LinkedIn. If anybody wants to join, it's called the Think Tank. But
feel free to pop a link in, by the way, because I think that kind of data would be invaluable to people that are joining us this morning. Yeah,
definitely. We're aiming to have that complete this quarter.
I can't multitask and ask you to do it now, Patsy, when I start talking or something.
Yeah, I can't multitask, Giles.
There was a reason why I asked that last question, and that was because moving on to the first part of this chat is that if sometimes we within HR and TA can't properly get our own heads around, or what's EVP, what's employer brand, what's the difference between the two, then how in the hell do we get our hiring managers to understand that? And I guess if there is a link or a comparison to be drawn between the customer experience of our brand and the candidate experience of our brand, then perhaps that might be a way of more simply or succinctly explaining what it is. But happy to be challenged on that. That is probably the first thing. I mean, how do we explain to our hiring managers the importance of either candidate experience or EVP or employer brand, or even what is the difference between each one of those? Lots of questions there. It's like one of those government briefings, isn't it, where they have one question, they ask about five, but there you go.
They must get those questions in advance, because there's no way they can remember to respond to them all on the cuff. I think that again, I think it's what information does the hiring manager need at that moment in time, because ultimately I spend my life going to these types of events that we're doing today, and I speak at a lot of them as well, and this is my life, but it's not theirs. They've got a job to do as well, and they've got targets. I mean, ironically, if they're looking to hire, they're probably got less time to do stuff than they would have previously. I think, though, that one of the things that we're seeing, and we're working with a number of organisations that might be seen as more traditional brands at the moment, and a number of, as well as new and emerging brands. But what we're finding is that Brexit, I think, started this, and I think COVID has really accelerated it. Organizations needing to be much clearer about what sits at the core of their customer proposition. Who are they? What's important to them? How are they organized to do it? What change is required, and what's going to drive that change? And I think that clarity gives us a really great opportunity to link the employer brand to driving that change or to helping to achieve those overall goals and objectives. And I think that's when you can have a really good quality conversation with the hiring manager, because you understand exactly where that manager is trying to get to and what they're trying to achieve and what pressure they're under. And then what you're talking about is not theory anymore. It's about the practical implementation of the employer brand that we all own as the people that work in the space. So, yeah, I think that there's a really strong correlation between the two. There ought to be a very strong correlation between the two, because how can you deliver a promise to your customer if you haven't aligned your people to be able to deliver it? And there are some really great organizations out there that you get a really great consumer experience from. I mean, I'm in the market for a sofa at the moment, a new sofa.
Okay.
And I know that Loaf, who are an online retailer, have got an amazing, they provide amazing customer experience. So, you order swatches and they send it with like a slice of cake and a tea bag. And it's, put the kettle on, sit back, relax, chew. So they're providing that experience, even though really it's just an online transaction. And it's where we've definitely got to think of, if this is the market we're playing in, where experience for customers is key. We've really got to start to make sure that our hiring managers are turned on to experience, not just when they're hiring, but as part of their everyday, so that they're challenging themselves to provide this great experience that becomes the stories that we talk about externally to them.
Okay. Good. I'm going to jump in just for a second. So on that sort of theme, in terms of making sure hiring managers have got the information they need, we have got a poll running at the moment. For anybody that's on right now on Crowdcast, sorry for anybody that's on LinkedIn and Twitter, please do respond in there. It's quite interesting. It seems that most people feel that they do currently have resources and tools in place for their leaders and hiring managers. But in terms of distilling it down and explaining it, Paul, I think that was really helpful. It's more about explaining it in their terms and perhaps a little bit more from the angle of the customer experience than perhaps confusing them with this language about EVP and all the rest of it, whatever is relevant to them. Thanks for the link, Paul, as well. So yeah. I guess it's one thing explaining to people what employer brand or EVP means in terms of hiring managers, but the next thing is really sort of getting their engagement. And how do you go about that? What's your advice?
Well, one of the things that we look at, so we've got a whole range of tools, as you'd expect, around defining what an employer brand's all about. So for us, it's broken into 4 key areas. So there's understanding who the audience is and what they want from you as their employer. And the challenge for us as recruiters is that in any organization, we've got such a variety of audiences that all want very different things. And
you mean in terms of different personas because of the types of roles you're going to be recruiting for?
Yeah. So somebody in finance and tech will be looking for something very different if they're in a warehouse role or working in a retail environment. But one employer brand has got to appeal to all of those different audiences. And that's a really unusual brief for people working in marketing. And when we get involved with marketeers, obviously what their role usually is to do is to really kind of sharpen the focus on everything that they do. So they want to get into a persona bracket that's very tight, and employer brand is totally different to that. So that is a real challenge. So understanding who are the audiences, what drives their career decisions, what their aspirations are, and the things that are really important to them.
Yeah.
And then being able to then assess those needs against your EVP. So for us, when we talk about EVP, it's the promise that you make. And so it's kind of a warehouse where you store absolutely everything that you've got to be able to offer anybody that might come and work for you. And that's all the rational stuff like pay and benefits, working environment, all of that sort of stuff. and the stuff that appeals to the heart as well, the emotional stuff, the culture, the leadership, the vision for the organization, things that you're going to buy in to above and beyond the rational stuff.
Which is probably more relevant now than it ever was.
Massively.
That last piece, for sure.
Yeah. So you understand who your audience are and what they want. You've been able to assess whether you've got something that they're interested in. The next thing that we would then look at is experience. Experience is one of the quadrants of our model. And when we talk about that, that's really about authenticity. So there's no point saying you one thing if that's not what you're actually delivering to your people. So we use the employer brand to move the dial wherever we can, or influence wherever we can, in terms of here are some things that are not working quite as well as they should do and should have some focus. So at least, when you're planning, you can think about how do we include those things. And then the fourth bit is the talent brand. And that's the bit that people would identify with most, I suppose, employer brand. So how does it look and feel? What's the messaging look like when it gets out there across your owned, earned and paid for channels? So those are the things that make up the employer brand. And one of the things that we recognized when we were going through a number of the defined stages with lots of different clients, a recurring theme in terms of one of the areas, once we'd done the employee surveys that came through, was leadership and management is typically not as strong as you might expect it to be in terms of employees' experience of working or being an employee, and because it came up almost in every survey that we did, we wanted to dig in and find out a little bit more and work out what we could do. And so what we've started to now build in is stakeholder engagement sessions. So the first cohort that we would launch an employer brand to would be that hiring manager leadership channel. So, I think in the past we've sort of gone straight to external and built a website and done all of the, changed all of the copy on the, Giles changed all of the copy on the ATS and all of that sort
of that good stuff. Yeah.
But actually,
proposing is more of an inside out approach.
Yeah, you've got to get people on board, and you've got to give them the tools. And I suppose we get really excited and we turn up when it's all been done and say, this is the employer brand. And I was like, well, I've got loads of other stuff going on. It's not relevant to me at the moment. Yeah. But actually, if you include people, bring them on the journey, explain what you're trying to do, and then provide them with some tools and resources to help support them, that just gives you a much more robust basis to build from.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, we'll talk quite a lot about candidate experience, and for recruiters to understand candidate experience, sometimes you just need to put yourself in the shoes of the candidate, walk through that process and see how the experience of it or how it feels to you. Is it true to say that in terms of getting hiring manager engagement, perhaps you need to do the same thing, basically meet in the middle, get them to put themselves in the shoe of the candidate and see what that experience looks like, and then understand the importance of it from their perspective?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's true not just of the hiring process. I think that what you've described and what we've experienced, we've hired through COVID as well. And what I think what we're all recognizing is that the onboarding process is much longer when you do it virtually. Because you are able to get people up to speed switching to a virtual way of doing that. So, train them on the systems that you use, the processes that you adopt, introduce them to the team that they're going to be working with. But the longer this goes on, there is a lack of confidence in people joining your team, and you need to be, as a hiring manager, you need to be switched on to that, and you do need to be making more of an effort to reach out, to engage with, to not assume that just because they're quiet that they're okay, that they may well not be. We're trying to do walk and talk meetings whenever we can with the whole social distancing side of things, which is really helping for us to still kind of keep in touch with people. And one of the things, when we surveyed at the beginning of the last lockdown, we surveyed, I think it was a couple of hundred people who were on furlough, just to try and understand what the experience had been to them. Obviously, at that stage, furlough was a brand new thing. And what came back was that most people had had a great experience at the very beginning when it was communicated to them what was happening. Once it was then handed over to the line manager, obviously some people had a great experience and other people had a terrible experience. And that's derailing for a business. It just means that you're going to lose that productivity and that focus. And I think that, it is difficult. As managers, we're expected to do a lot. But, at the moment, we've got people that are homeschooling, that are still trying to work, that, I don't have kids. So, I've got to really work hard to put myself in the shoes of somebody who is trying to do this and also looking after, well, not just looking after, but feeling like, if feeling critically, if they don't teach their kids, they're going to fall behind by the time they get back to school. So I think that experience piece is more challenging than it's ever been. And I think this feeling that businesses right at the top, we're having conversations from briefs that are coming right from the boardroom. They're interested in how can we be more considerate, empathetic, more a kinder organization. So there are some brand new, kind of priorities for businesses that are really cool and sort of unexpected, and the things that we'd all have loved to have worked on for a long time.
Yeah. So I think to sort of summarize, if you like, it's as recruiters generally, I think we're having to focus a lot more on some of our soft skills. And a big part of that is dialing up things like, empathy and what have you, emotional intelligence and that kind of thing. And from a hiring manager perspective, any hiring manager worth a salt is going to feel that they have or are delivering real value to their organization. And helping them to understand what a good experience looks like from the perspective of a new hire, a candidate, is pretty critical, and almost like having scales fall from their eyes a little bit and saying, yeah, now I see, now I get the value of it, and really explaining things in their terms. And it might even be commercially. So the benefits of giving candidates or applicants or interviewees a really positive experience right the way through in a professional one is the difference between getting somebody into the team that is the absolute right fit, that is going to perform more quickly, stay longer, and ultimately contribute to that individual hiring manager's team success or wider organizational success as well.
Yeah. There's a moment of opportunity here, isn't there? That the HR community is suddenly more vital to any organization that they work in than they ever have done before. And I'm really proud to be part of this community, because right at the start, it was my HR network that was saying, well, have we considered it's not actually a safe environment for everybody to work from home? I'd never even thought about that. Some people, can't work from the perspective that HR people bring to an organization is vitally important, because it's all about how do we get our people pointing in the same direction as our business plan. And, often business leaders, it's just not a natural part of their skill set. Great strategists, great salespeople, brilliant marketeers can spot an error in a spreadsheet from a mile off, but, not often, as connected to people as perhaps the HR community are. So I think there is a moment of opportunity, but I think we've got to seize it, and we've got to start when we're dealing with people in the boardroom. We've got to start talking their language. And I think employer brand is a really great example of an area where we can say, actually, this is about productivity. This is about retaining our best talent. This is about being able to grow, help your business to grow. This is about being able to add more money to the bottom line or work more efficiently. Because an employer brand and all of the things that are involved in HR will contribute to doing that. We've got to be more specific about the language that we use. And there are some great case studies out there. And there's a famous one that gets quoted a lot, but it's still a great one. So Virgin Media, who, were able to their NPS score to their NPS score and cancellation rates. They were able to find a link between that and a really poor experience for volume hiring. And they correlate, they made some changes, they improved the process and the experience of candidates because they estimated that the loss was, I think it was about £4 million. It was huge. The number of people that just had been treated so badly that the first thing they did once they got through the process was cancel their contract. And I think that, for me, this kind of aligning of the two brands, the employer brand and the consumer brand going hand in hand, is our opportunity to have more fulfilling strategic conversations and have more influence at board level, and for HR to start to be that route into the most senior roles within an organisation.
Yeah, some interesting points you touched on there. So, the first being that a light has been shone on HR especially, but also TA and recruitment over the last 11, 12 months. And it's a window of opportunity that we really need to grasp in terms of gaining more serious recognition and attention from board or senior leadership. And if we're talking about hiring managers and how we get them more engaged in the recruitment process or embracing employer brand or EVP, like any strategic project, doesn't matter if it's implementing an ATS or HR and payroll, having, again, a top-down approach in terms of that being cascaded. So get senior stakeholder and leadership buy-in, and then the rest of it will be far, far easier in terms of those comms cascading down, getting people to really buy in it rather than trying to push up the other way from recruitment without that. So get that. But I think what you're saying, Paul, is, again, this has come up a few times in previous webinars, that within HR and TA, we need to speak the language of, if you like, C-suite or senior leadership in order to get their clear understanding of the real value that projects like this will deliver to ultimately the bottom line, business performance, all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's that business case, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but in boardrooms, it is all about, it is about bottom line. I think reputation, particularly for individuals in the C-suite, is important. So if you think about Glassdoor and other peer-to-peer sites, CEOs are looking at what their approval rating is. They care about that. That's really close to home. Mm-hmm. So there are things like that I think are important to draw on. And I think that HR can sometimes, I get the feeling, it can sometimes sort of be seen as a cost rather than an investment. And
too often,
at times we're the ones that saying, no, you can't do that, you've got to do it this way because we've got a duty of care to our people. So it feels like we're slowing the process down. But I think sometimes it's about getting ballsy about the investment that's needed and giving people a reality check about what's really going to happen. I mean, the amount of briefs that we take where a very traditional business has suddenly decided that they are now a tech business, and their brief is go out and recruit 50 to 100 new tech developers to work in North Yorkshire, and you're like, well, let's think about how realistic this is. And so, I think that if we can, and we really want to do this, one of the reasons we set up Think Tank is we want to provide evidence and we want to provide stats and data that can build the case for investment and employer brand, because I think this is the moment to do it. It's this is the time when people are really genuinely thinking about things in a different way. And I know I talk a lot, sorry Charles, but one last thing I would say that
this is the chat, and it's interesting and it's important, and you've touched on something that is very, very important, in that if we challenge ourselves, then how often do we try and influence decisions without solid data? And it's very, very hard to argue with data if it's clear. So if you're producing that kind of data, or if you're currently looking to get people more engaged with the significance and the importance of EVP or employer brand, then start feeding data into SLTs and into hiring managers as well, because then they'll suddenly see the value that it really does deliver.
I agree. And I think at the moment we've all had a taste of things that we've never experienced before. So I'm quite a resilient character, I'm not often down. I'm often, quite pragmatic, find it easy to kind of drive through on things. Haven't really had an understanding of mental health, and people that suffer with mental health. Always been very empathetic, sympathetic, keen to support people however we possibly can. And I think that we've all recognized that sometimes life is tough and it's hard and things are out of your control, and you can feel, a bit more anxious than you might normally do, feel a bit lost, not sure which way forward. And so I think leaders just generally we've all had a taste of that at one moment or another over the past 12 months. Everybody's had a little bit of a taste of uncertainty. So, and we know that when that is happening to us and we're concerned and we're worried, we're not as productive, we're not as strong, we're not as decisive. So again, some of those things that HR people have been talking about and influencing for a long, long time are suddenly very real and very close to home for some of the decision makers and senior people that we really need to get on board and help bang the drum.
I'm going to ask you for some quite specific solutions to practical problems that I know some of our own clients have. But before we do that, I've got a quick question for you. So this is from Derek. You reference case studies and using data to influence board discussion and approval for employer brand. Why does the Virgin Media case study from years ago still remain as the only one really referenced? Why is there not more data or evidence being produced in this area? Great question. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it is the most famous one, and it is, I suppose it's just the one that we've all got to hand. But that was one of the reasons that we set up the think tank, to try and understand where are those other stories coming from. I think the good thing about Virgin is that it's such a clear-cut case, because it was, a huge chunk of money, and they had managed to find this really direct correlation. What we're finding with our clients is it's kind of like smaller battles that are helping to win the war. So, I mean, a really simple example, we're working with a really big retailer at the moment. Obviously, they're rushed off their feet, crazy busy, finding it challenging to recruit finance professionals. And so we spent some time with one of their senior directors, and we interviewed him. We got him to think about why somebody might want to join them from the Big Four. What are the pros at working in-house versus working in the Big Four, so that we were able to then come up with 7-8 different versions of messages aimed to do the same thing. And we've seen engagement levels and application levels and relevance of those applications spike as a result. So I think there are lots of these kind of smaller winning the battle. But it's a great headline grabber, isn't it? The Virgin one. I think, maybe an action for us is let's gather together some of those other big case studies that are going on, and get them together as a resource for everybody to use.
Sure. And I think the old adage of if you can measure it, you can improve it is really important. So if you're not currently measuring candidate experience, satisfaction using NPS scores, then implement it, and then suddenly you've got some data to go on. Now I'm going to dig into I want answers to some quite specific questions, and these are some things that we struggle with, or rather our clients struggle with. So there's two bits. Hiring managers, by their very nature, in a position of responsibility, influence. Sometimes they've got access to quite significant networks, and they're probably in quite a privileged position to be able to reach quite a wide audience and really positively influence it in terms of talent attraction. But when it comes to if you like, building their personal professional brand and conveying employer brand, perhaps via social media, using video or images and that kind of stuff, it can be daunting. Even though we've been sat on Zoom and Teams for 11 months now, pretty much solidly, still recording a video or appearing on video, just like we are, can be daunting. So what is your advice in terms of encouraging hiring managers to create their own content that they can then distribute amongst their own networks and pull people in? And second part to that question is, equally, for example, I'm going to use job trainers as a specific example. There's various areas within our platform, such as media-rich job adverts, where you can include video as well as images within a job advert, or our area called Green Room Onboarding, which is a whole engagement piece around onboarding, where you can have welcome videos from the team or hiring managers to give people a real sense of belonging before they join the organization. Producing that content proves really difficult in terms of just recording it, giving hiring managers or other stakeholders the confidence to do it. So what are your practical tips to start generating that content? Because I think we all recognize the value of it, but actually getting a library of it seems to be quite a challenge.
So I would say, first of all, don't give yourselves a hard time over it. Actually just start small. Some of the best engagement that I get when I share on LinkedIn is where I've read an article on a news site and I share it with my own comments. And, that really annoys me, because if I originate something and I spend like half a day writing something, toiling over it, making it really great, and then I get virtually no engagement on it, versus just a simple share that's taking me like sort of 5 minutes whilst I'm eating my toast in the morning. So I think that, the ideal is that we've got very active influencers, but we said at the beginning, hiring managers, are hiring and they're probably very busy as a result. So at that moment in time, it's not the best time to turn up and say, right, let's shoot a video, let's get loads of content together. So I think, first of all, start small. Think about what you can do as hiring managers to provide them with the tools. So things like Google Alerts to scoop in a load of relevant content.
Nice tip. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you could then just add some comments on and send it to the hiring manager, say, post this out today. Everybody can spend 2 minutes posting something that somebody else has given to them. That's really useful. And Google Alerts is fantastic. If you're not using them, they are brilliant just in terms of giving you all of that relevant content. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is the time to pull content together is when you're not hiring, and we go through these peaks and troughs, and that's the time to get hold of people. And if they don't want to do video, don't force them, find another format. So we're using sliders and storybooks and infographics and all sorts of different ways to engage people. So we don't have to have, if we've got someone that's really camera shy, we shouldn't be making them go on camera and speak because they won't come across well anyway. So there's always different options. The third thing that I would say is that influencers sometimes don't realize that they are influencers. They don't realize that they've got this network and these people that are going to be interested in them. So again, just having that conversation about why is this important, and and what potentially can you help us to achieve? Because we all know that relevance spikes. If you are seeing something or responding to something because you're in that similar group and similar mindset, we know that relevance is going to spike. And then there was a fourth thing, but I didn't write it down. It's gone out of my head for a moment, so it may back.
And they're all really practical tips. And in terms of, I guess you mentioned sort of news or newsworthy items and that kind of stuff, there is, for anybody that's listening, there is quite a good website called Feedly, which allows you to put in different keywords and things. And it'll automatically then give you a list of really interesting articles that you can then comment on or share really easily via social networks. And it's sort of almost like a 5-10 minute job in the morning. So it's almost getting into a behavior. And I think what you're saying, Paul, is that rather than just expecting our hiring managers to, if you must like follow a list of, do this and what have you, it's almost like providing them with the tools that they need, providing them with all the support they need as well. And timing is obviously critical. If in the middle of hiring, it's going to be the wrong time to record a video. Yeah. But if they're quite quiet, they might feel A, more relaxed, and B, more open to the idea. It's really good tips.
The other thing that I would just add there is relevance. So when we talked at the beginning about the audience and understanding who the audience are, we want to work out. So say, for example, you have got, people in tech, they tend to be people who care about the organization they're going to work for, the influence they'll have on the result and the behaviors that they'll drive, whether that organization is set up to do good. That's really important to people in tech. So we would also link in with people around internal comms, PR, marketing, branding, and we would be taking content that already exists and editing it, changing it, or commenting on it to make it relevant for those audience groups.
Yep.
So one of the things that we've just done for a client who did a huge amount of work around diversity and inclusion, produced a suite of videos that they've used for different purposes. We've repurposed them and we've used them across all of their.
Chopping up a little bit into bite-sized chunks and stuff.
Yeah. So again, there's stuff that we can do that isn't always good. What we don't want to do is, you just don't want that situation where every time somebody sees you approaching, they walk in the other direction because you're going to give them work or ask them to do something. Equally, if you're not getting where you want to get to, you're trying to get somebody onto a video and it's not going anywhere. There are other options and it's worthwhile trying those things.
Brilliant. So I'm conscious of the time. Honestly, this morning's session has been really, really helpful, really illuminating. Really grateful to you for your time, and grateful to everybody else for joining us. It's been a very, very popular session. I really hope that those who have joined us this morning, whether it's via LinkedIn or Crowdcast, have got some value from it. We're going to be doing more sessions around hiring manager engagement this year for our Job Train How Talent sessions. We're going to be running themes. So we've got hiring managers coming up, which we're doing right now. We've got volume recruitment. We've got onboarding, candidate experience, a whole bunch of different themes. So if you've enjoyed or got some nuggets from this morning's conversation, I'm really pleased. These sessions are available to everybody, so feel free to share them. Thank you for your time. Thank you to you, Paul. I hope everybody has a really good week, and I hope to see you soon.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
See you later.
Thanks, everybody.